For weeks now, the story everyone tells about Lady Sarah Chatto has been a story of refusal. She walked away from Princess Margaret. She inherited the title, the connections, the glamour, the whole dazzling apparatus of being the Queen's niece, and she turned every piece of it down. All of that is true, but it leaves out the most important thing. The last two videos on this channel, the one about the daughter who escaped the Margaret curse and the one about 4 inherited things she refused, told half the story, the half that needed telling. But the question those videos left behind was the more interesting one. You asked it in the comments, the same question over and over. All right, she refused everything. So what did she keep? Sarah Chatto didn't erase Princess Margaret. She did something far harder and far more revealing. Out of 5 things her mother handed her, she kept exactly 1. Not the jewels, not the apartments, not the place at the center of royal life. She kept the single inheritance Margaret herself most wanted to pass on. The one thing nobody photographs and nobody auctions. And she built her entire private world around protecting it. To understand Sarah Chatto, stop asking what she walked away from. Ask what she carried with her when she left. Because once you know what it was, the woman everyone calls the one who escaped looks like the only person who ever truly understood her mother at all. Born May 1st, 1964, at Kensington Palace. Full name at birth, Lady Sarah Frances Elizabeth Armstrong Jones. She is the only daughter of Princess Margaret, Countess of Snowdon, and Anthony Armstrong Jones, the first Earl of Snowdon, the late Queen's niece, King Charles's only maternal first cousin alongside her brother David. She married actor-turned-artist Daniel Chatto in July 1994, took his name, and quietly stepped away from the institutional life her birth had pointed her toward. She isn't a working royal. She receives no sovereign grant funding. She carries no official duties on behalf of the crown, the public profile that defined her mother for 5 decades, the more than 80 patronages, the official tours, the diplomatic engagements. Sarah set all of it down. But she didn't set down everything. That is what we are here to establish. Before we name the 1 inheritance she kept, the 4 she refused deserve their honest, compact accounting. Not a repeat of what prior videos covered at length. A brief reckoning, 1 fact each, before we move on to what matters. The first inheritance was the public-facing royal profile. Margaret fulfilled an enormous schedule of official engagements across her working life, holding more than 80 patronages simultaneously, traveling on behalf of the crown, visible and on duty at functions from London to New York. Sarah carries none of that. She appears at family events, jubilees, weddings, funerals, but as a family member, not as a function. There is no court circular entry for Lady Sarah Chatto. The machinery of official royal life, she simply declined to operate. The second inheritance was the title and party circuit. Few people know this, but Sarah is technically entitled to be styled princess. The rank flows from her descent. She has never used it, not once in her adult public life. She is Lady Sarah, the courtesy title of an earl's daughter, and she has worn it so consistently that the higher designation feels like it belongs to someone else. Margaret's social world, the Kensington Palace parties, the Mystique Winters, the famous Margaret set of late-night entertainers and aristocratic hangers-on. Sarah stepped away from all of it. She attends the large family occasions. She does not perform the circuit. The third inheritance was the temperament. Princess Margaret's volatility is among the most thoroughly documented aspects of her character. Craig Brown's 2017 biography, Ma'am Darling, 99 Glimpses of Princess Margaret, captured both the magnetic and the destructive Margaret in equal measure, the one who could entrance a room and the one who could devastate it. Biographers including Christopher Warwick and Tim Heald documented the dramatic instability across her life, the famous rages, the impossible demands. The press coverage of Sarah, by contrast, reaches for the same vocabulary so consistently it registers as almost a discipline: calm, gentle, unassuming, even-tempered. The contrast didn't happen by accident. She grew up inside the cost of that volatility, and the record of her adult life shows she made a sustained, visible choice against inheriting it. The fourth inheritance was financial dependence on the crown. Margaret's financial life was substantially structured around the institution: the sovereign grant, the Kensington Palace apartment, the architecture of royal subsidy. Sarah and Daniel Chatto built their household outside all of that. Daniel Chatto has a documented independent career: acting credits through the 1980s, Quartet in 1981, Little Dorrit in 1987, A Shocking Accident, and then a second career as a practicing visual artist. The couple is self-supporting. No royal allowance, no sovereign grant income. The institutional safety net Margaret lived within, Sarah refused. 4 things. Set down one by one. The pattern is clear and consistent and real. Now the 5th. To understand what Sarah Chatto kept, you have to understand what Princess Margaret actually was beneath the headline version of her life. Margaret is remembered as a glamorous, tragic, difficult figure. The sister who couldn't marry Peter Townsend. The woman whose private life became a permanent public spectacle. That is one Margaret. But there was another one, and she was serious in ways the biography covers rarely linger on. She became the first president of the Royal Ballet in 1957, the year after the company and the Royal Ballet School received their royal charter. Queen Elizabeth II as patron, Margaret as president of both the school and the company. She held those positions for more than 4 decades, until her death. The Royal Ballet School's own institutional records are unambiguous. She wasn't a figurehead. She visited regularly, attended performances and school events, and embedded herself in the life of the institution across 5 decades. In 1951, she opened the school's site at Barons Court. In 1957, she named the Anna Pavlova Studio at White Lodge. In 1990, she named the Margot Fonteyn Theatre at the same building. When Dame Margot Fonteyn, the greatest British ballerina of the century and the face of everything the Royal Ballet represented, ran into serious financial difficulties late in her life, it was Margaret who played a key role in launching a fund to support her. In 1979, Margaret undertook a fundraising tour to the United States, specifically to raise money for the Royal Opera House extension, including new rehearsal studios for the Royal Ballet. These aren't ceremonial gestures. These are acts of sustained institutional commitment over decades. She played the piano from the age of 4. Official royal biographies describe her as a keen pianist. On Desert Island Discs in 1981, she chose Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake as one of her preferred pieces. Not a casual or diplomatic selection, but the ballet repertoire she had spent decades protecting as its institutional president. Music and ballet were described by the same official sources as 2 of her great enthusiasms in the arts. The biographer Christopher Warwick, who knew her personally and wrote the authorized biography, Princess Margaret, A Life of Contrasts, described her as immersed in the arts throughout her life, not as performance, but as genuine vocation. There was also the social dimension, and it was real. Picasso apparently wanted to marry her. Gore Vidal defended her. Craig Brown's Ma'am Darling is precise enough to capture both the serious Margaret and the preposterous Margaret in the same frame. Her love of beauty was authentic, even when her behavior around it was theatrical. The parties at Kensington Palace served real music and involved real musicians. The connections to artists and performers were substantive, not decorative. Underneath the famous drama of her life ran a consistent aesthetic sensibility that lasted until she couldn't sustain it any longer. That sensibility was what she handed Sarah, and Sarah took it and ran. The evidence isn't soft. It's specific, institutional, and documented. In September 1982, Sarah Armstrong Jones, 18 years old, just out of Bedale School with a single A level in art, enrolled in a foundation art course at Camberwell College of Art. Camberwell wasn't a hobby school. Its painting program had deep roots in serious British figurative tradition. She didn't drift into it. She chose it deliberately, as the thing she wanted to do with her life. At the point when she had the first real choice, she pursued further formal training afterward. Her gallery biography, held at the Redfern Gallery where she is shown continuously since 1995, lists study at the Royal Academy Schools. Other biographical accounts mention Middlesex Polytechnic, and both likely reflect different stages of a sustained, committed education. The contested post-Camberwell path matters less than the prizes that came out of it. In 1988, she won the Winsor & Newton Prize. In 1990, she won the Creswick Landscape Prize, a Royal Academy Schools award specifically for landscape painting. 2 prizes, named institutions, confirmed years. That is a competitive academic record, not a gentle pursuit. Since 1995, she is shown continuously at the Redfern Gallery in London, a serious commercial gallery with a serious exhibition record, always under the name Sarah Armstrong Jones. Not Chatto, not Lady Sarah. The name she uses professionally is the one that belongs to her as an artist, unattached to the title. Her gallery biography describes her work as focused on landscapes and interiors, with attention to texture, Sussex chalk, Scottish granite, the quality of light falling through a window. The critic Patrick Kinmonth, writing about her work for the Redfern's artist page, described her paintings as growing like plants flowering or landscapes excavated over time. That phrase comes from someone looking seriously at what she makes. Her work appears regularly at auction, oil and gouache on paper, small scale, precise, collected. Her output includes work such as South India Still Life, a painter who travels, observes, returns to the canvas. Works by Sarah Armstrong Jones fetch hundreds to low thousands of pounds at auction. She isn't a major art market figure, and this script won't overstate that. But she is a practicing, represented, prize-winning painter with a continuous exhibition record spanning 3 decades. That isn't an enthusiasm. That is a vocation. In a rare public statement about her aesthetic life, she told Country Life magazine that her favorite painting is The Baptism of Christ by Piero della Francesca, hanging in the National Gallery in London. I always go and look at it, she said, not performed appreciation. The thing a painter says about a painting that keeps teaching them something. And in June 2024, the Royal Ballet School announced her appointment as its president, succeeding King Charles III in the role, explicitly continuing her mother's legacy. The school's announcement used specific language. It cited her everlasting love and devotion to the arts, and described her appointment as following in Princess Margaret's devoted footsteps. The institution Margaret served for more than 4 decades now has Sarah at its head. She first accepted the vice presidency in 2004, 2 years after her mother's death, when she was under no obligation whatsoever to do so. She accepted because the arts were hers, not by inheritance of position, but by genuine conviction. Her husband, Daniel Chatto, who quietly traded acting for painting, is also now a practicing visual artist. The art's identity didn't flow through one branch of the family. It saturated the household. That is what the careful keeping of one inheritance looks like when it takes root. But there is a second dimension to what Sarah carried forward from Margaret, the part that required learning from what had gone wrong, not just continuing what had gone right. Margaret was one of the most scrutinized women of the 20th century. The cameras followed her constantly. The press documented her marriages, her affairs, her failings, her illnesses, her late nights, her moods. David and Sarah Armstrong Jones grew up inside that exposure. The Kensington Palace nursery, the official overseas trips, the photographers outside every entrance. Their parents' marriage broke apart when Sarah was 12 and formally ended when she was 14. The press documented all of it. Sarah watched, at close range, what sustained public exposure did to a person she loved. When she became a mother, she applied the lesson structurally. Her sons, Samuel and Arthur, have grown to adulthood with virtually no tabloid footprint. The biographical record for both of them is sparse almost by design. They appear at major family events, they are known by name, and otherwise they have been kept out of public circulation throughout their childhoods and into adulthood. Arthur reportedly served with the Royal Marines as of 2022. For the grandchildren of Princess Margaret, a woman whose every private moment was photographed and published, this comparative invisibility is itself remarkable. No formal media policy was ever announced, no interview explaining the approach. The protection was structural and silent, the kind that works precisely because it was never performed. The one documented public occasion where Samuel is named on his own terms is a charity art auction. He and Sarah donated work together. The context of his single-named public act is art. It says something about what the family considers worth showing. Margaret was fiercely protective of certain things she loved: the ballet, her musicians, her aesthetic world. She was less successful at protecting the people closest to her. Sarah appears to have taken that fierce protectiveness and redirected it entirely toward family. The same instinct, aimed differently. Not at the arts world, at the two boys who grew up almost unseen. On February 8, 2002, Princess Margaret suffered her final stroke. She died the following day, February 9th, at King Edward VII Hospital in London, aged 71. Contemporaneous press reporting, including the Los Angeles Times obituary published the following day, stated that both her children were at her bedside: Lord David Linley, 40, and Lady Sarah Chatto, 37. Official royal sources confirmed the date, cause, and location. The specific detail of who was in the room at the final moment rests on contemporaneous press accounts rather than institutional records, but the pattern is consistent with everything the prior years had shown about Sarah's relationship with her mother. She wasn't a distant daughter checking in from across a careful separation. The warmth between Margaret and Sarah is the part the "she escaped" narrative consistently fails to account for. Sarah inherited the bulk of her mother's jewelry collection, the personal legacy Margaret chose to leave in her daughter's custody. Biographers and royal observers consistently describe the relationship as genuinely close. Not without difficulty, not without the complications that Margaret's life inevitably introduced, but warm, continuous, real. You don't stand at a parent's bedside as a daughter who escaped. You stand there as a daughter who stayed. On February 15, 2002, at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle, Sarah stood as one of the two principal mourners at her mother's funeral. The Associated Press wire confirmed it. Viscount Linley and Lady Sarah Chatto, alongside the Queen, Prince Philip, and Prince Charles. She stood in front of the world one more time, for her mother, at the center of the ceremony she had declined to perform for decades. She did it without hesitation and without ambivalence. She was there because she loved her. That's the whole sentence. 2 years later, in 2004, she accepted the vice presidency of the Royal Ballet, Margaret's institution. 20 years after that, in 2024, she became its president. The line of artistic succession is unbroken. They keep calling her the daughter who escaped, the one who walked away and never looked back. But Sarah Chatto never escaped Princess Margaret. She chose her, carefully, out of 5 things, taking only the one that mattered and leaving the rest on the palace floor. She kept the love of beauty, and she kept the fierce instinct to shield the people she loved from the world that had never once shielded Margaret. Everyone else inherited the scandal. Sarah inherited the soul. And that is why, when she finally turned and walked into a quiet life, nobody at the palace argued. Because the daughter who refused everything was the only one who'd understood her mother all along. Subscribe if you want more stories like this.